Hello and welcome to the program. I'm Felicity Ezewike. Today, we'll be discussing in this first half the Wagner Group being replaced by another to serve Russia's interest in Africa. But this time, they'll be doing it officially. The new Africa Corps has already been deployed to Burkina Faso. The depth of the relations between Burkina Faso and Russian President Vladimir Putin was made clear a few days ago, according to a report on Deutsche Welle, when Moscow decided to help the country's military junta out by sending 100 military staff to Ouagadougou. This is even as the war in Ukraine continues unabated. Quoting a Telegram post, the report said the deployed soldiers are supposed to help protect the junta leader Ibrahim Traoré, as well as the public from terrorist attacks. But as members of the newly established Russian African Corps landed in the capital city, pundits say it was clear they would in fact be taking over from the defunct Wagner Group. However, this new unit will contrast to Wagner by directly being subordinate to Russia's defense ministry. Another 200 soldiers will also soon be dispatched to Burkina Faso. According to Russian historian Irina Filatova, a professor emeritus at the University of KwaZulu-Natal in South Africa, the new military structure is intended for deployment in 4 other African countries. These are Libya, the Central African Republic, Mali, and Niger. Supporters of the military rulers in Ouagadougou have begun to react, some praising the arrival of the Russian soldiers, with one leader of a movement close to the military leaders, Nestor Podese, saying they're here to train the men for handling weapons which the Burkinabe state had ordered. It is natural that they have come to train them. But is this a shared sentiment? What are the interpretations to this development? My guest will be introduced after this short break. Thank you for staying with us. My guest for this part of the program is Adib Sani, Foreign Policy and Security Analyst. He joins us from Accra, Ghana. Good to have you on one slot. Let's begin by establishing what more there is to this new Africa Corps, maybe in your area of specialty that the rest of us might not be aware of, because there seem to be conflicting emotions as to the real purpose of this new Africa Corps.
Well, thank you so much, Felicity, for the opportunity. Indeed, close watchers like us have always known that there would be a time this would happen. Indeed, at a point, Russian mercenary group, the Wagner, had gained so much attention and has become a formidable force in Africa. And so when Prigozhin was finally killed, or I should say died, a lot of people were asking what would become of Wagner and whether their footprints would still be maintained in the number of countries that they have maintained presence over the period of time. The president of Ghana, President Nana Addo Akufo-Addo, was in Washington last year. When he met the U.S. Foreign Secretary, he mentioned that Ghana was concerned about the activities of Wagner in neighboring Burkina Faso, and that they were here engaging in all manner of activities, including activities within the extractive industry. But at that time, it was a secret. Nobody knew whether indeed Wagner was on the ground in Burkina Faso or not. Now, a new face has suddenly been exposed, the new Africa core. You see, the head and tail of all of these, okay, because in sociology, we have what we call latent and manifest functions, okay? That is the intended and unintended. There's this open function, which they would conveniently say is to fight terrorism or to help improve security in those countries or to help their governments. But when you go beyond the intended to the unintended function, you would get to realize that this is about dominance, this is about the East-West scuffle, this is about the war in Ukraine, and this is about resources that various global actors are clamoring to have in Africa. And the only way you can succeed is to have some level of influence. And one of those specific ways to get that influence, to exert it, is through military power. And that's exactly what we are seeing. However, when Vice President Kamala Harris went to Zambia somewhere last year, in fact, from Ghana, she went to Zambia. When she was in Ghana, I was one of those persons invited to be at the event at the Independence Square. But after that, she was in Zambia, and the president said, look, the fact that we're doing business with China doesn't mean we are an enemy to the West. And the fact that we're doing business with the West doesn't mean we are an enemy to the East. So now a lot of countries are finding it hard to strike the balance. Who do we deal with? Because it's now quite obvious and straightforward to the effect that if you do business with Russian military, it means you are an enemy to the West. So it has left a lot of these countries in a quagmire. But for some, like Burkina Faso, like Mali, Niger, and others, it's no secret any longer because their regimes are threatened and they feel that the world has turned their backs on them, and the only way out of that situation is for them to redefine their alliances. And that's exactly what we've seen play out.
All right, there's something you said that I'm quite intrigued about. You said there is the unintended and intended goals for this Africa core. You mentioned the connection to the war in Ukraine. Can you be a bit more specific when you say, what is the connection with the war in Ukraine? Is it that Russia is trying to, pad itself up? Is it losing? Does it need the buffer of, showing off its influence on the African continent?
Well, after the Second World War, the globe became bipolar, okay? I mean, to some extent, at a point it was even multipolar. But after the fall of the Berlin Wall, there was a hegemony formed. America became the only superpower of the world, with the largest number of military bases than any country on earth, with the largest military expenditure and advancement in security hardware and technology. We have had America participate directly or indirectly in a lot of conflict situations globally. America became the watchman of the globe, all right? But now things are beginning to change. Economically, militarily. Now we have China, Brazil, Russia, and other, in fact, South Africa. And now we are beginning to see Saudi Arabia, Iran, and the rest interested in forming an economic alliance that would break the petrodollar dominance. Beyond that, we are also beginning to see more and more countries spending on their militaries. In fact, who has ever thought at any point in time that Turkey would become one of the foremost global superpowers so far as drone warfare or technology is concerned? As a result, Russia is seeking to reassert their dominance and influence that they have lost since the break of the Soviet Union. And one of the places to achieve that is Africa, the most blessed, the richest continent in the world. Despite the plundering, Africa still has great, rich mineral resources that is providing the fuel to the global military, industrial, economic complex. Okay, so Africa is gradually becoming the new front for the tussle between the East and the West. That is why we need to be extremely careful and choose the right friends. When I say the right friends, what I mean is the friends would make that would inure to our benefits. When it comes to protecting the sanctity of the state, when it comes to protecting the interest of the state, there's no morality. You go where you would get that help from. And that is why a lot of countries are torn between. So now the confusion, if I may put it that way, between the East and the West is playing out in Africa and is further exacerbated because of what is happening in Ukraine. There's been allegations of recruits sought in Africa to go and fight in Ukraine. So there are a lot of benefits these global superpowers would get from Africa, and that is why we see them trying to make friends with us. But like I indicated, what should matter to us is what is in our best interests.
So what is in our best interest with our leaders embracing the Russians and other foreign powers? Are we retrogressing? Are they not weighing? I mean, you're analyzing this, you're seeing it from this perspective. How is it that our leaders are not seeing it? Or does the benefit of this relationship outweigh the risk that there may be?
Well, we need to be very careful, okay? Since independence, a lot of African countries have maintained a non-aligned posture so far as the East and West divide is concerned, okay? We have been able to maintain cordiality with the East at the same time the West. In Ghana, a lot of these Eastern countries are major trading partners. Iran maintains a strong presence in Ghana. The same way Israel, if there's a Palestinian embassy in Ghana, there's an Israeli embassy in Ghana. Almost all the Western countries have their embassies in Ghana. In fact, I've even worked with them at different levels, at different times. So Ghana, for instance, has maintained that non-aligned posture. But we're beginning to see a shift in our foreign policy, which I think is more political than state-like, you know. So when this party is in power, they take this shift, which might be contravening state foreign policy. For example, we've seen President Nana Addo Dankwa taking a much more harder stance so far as the East and the West is concerned. I mean, he said it categorically, we are with Israel. Just recently, he was in Austria, and he said it, Israel has the right to defend itself. I've met the president at different events. One of it is the Commonwealth Summit, which was held in Accra last year. He said, we are opposed to the invasion of Ukraine, and we are opposed to stronger countries taking advantage of smaller countries and all that.
But isn't that risky? Isn't that risky for us? I mean, decisions decided based on politics rather than the collective good. What would be maybe the implications for Africa? Because these leaders are transient. They come and they go, but the state remains. So, I mean, I want you to speak on that.
Well, I have been one of the most vociferous persons to speak on this issue. I said that, look, what the president is doing is diluting our foreign policy. Ghana is one of the most respected countries within the international space so far as promotion of peace and security is concerned. So when we begin to take such stance, it becomes dangerous for us, and we might not be respected by the other side. A clear case in point is when he went to Washington to talk about the activities of Wagner in Burkina Faso. The Burkinabe authorities were not happy with that. Look, Ghana had to apologize. They sent a delegation led by the National Security Minister. Then later, the president himself went there because there's a lot of damage that can happen. We rely to a very large extent on intelligence from Burkina Faso. So if they cannot trust us, why would they give us intel? Okay, so we need, a lot of these countries really need to be careful, and they need to strike the balance, weigh the options, and see what helps. But from my perspective, as you know, someone who has been within this space and learned a lot, and I've studied different country contexts, I think taking the non-aligned posture is the way to go. You can do business with the East, and you can equally do business with the West. And
but you yourself acknowledge. You yourself acknowledge that it's becoming increasingly difficult to do. What could be the driving reason for governments who have previously taken the stance that you mentioned, non-alignment? Why are they changing so fast? Again, it goes back to my question about decisions made on politics rather than the collective good.
All right, so let me be honest with you. Let me be frank with you.
Please.
Had it not been for the IMF, Ghana's economy would have collapsed. Look, things became so bad to the extent that, I mean, I am a security service provider. On a Saturday, I took an amount of money from a client to provide him with surveillance cameras. On a Saturday, that was 5,000 Ghana cedis. On a Monday, when I went to the market to get the items, it had increased to 10,000, 100%. I conveniently packaged the money and took it back to the clients. Prices were spiraling out of control due to, according to the government, two reasons. One, COVID-19 and the invasion of Ukraine by Russia and the shock it's had on the global economy, okay? And so we had to run to the IMF, even though in the past, our government has indicated over and over again, there's no way we are going to IMF. Whoever thinks we are going to IMF must be delusional. But we had to go to the IMF. And who are the IMF? You know, and for a lot, and this is synonymous with many other countries within the establishment, even Nigeria. The economy is crawling, for crying out loud. And mostly the help comes from the Western countries. And now we are getting a certain picture. You are either with us or against us. You cannot be in the middle. That is why it has become difficult.
This help, I mean, based off what you're saying, it's looking more like a noose than help in itself. But again, let's see if we can shift a little. Analysts like yourself are saying that the arrival of Russian soldiers may come as a relief even for many people who have no ties with the military rulers or might have been opposed to military dictatorship. Burkina Faso, now I'm talking to Burkina Faso. Do you concur? If yes, why would they be relieved and not worried? Because what you've expressed, much of the conversation we've had so far, is concern over these growing relationships.
Well, a lot of these countries are desperate. Mali is desperate because it's fighting Al-Qaeda-linked militants and ISIS-linked militants to the east and the west, and it's fighting the Azawats in the north. We've seen an increase in the number of attacks in Niger, almost has become a daily ritual. The terrorists control over 70% of the land in Burkina Faso. They are winning by the day. And so these countries are desperate. This coupled with the sanctions imposed on these countries by ECOWAS, all right? So they are looking left, right, center, wherever they think they can get the help from, they wouldn't hesitate. The French have left. MINUSMA has ended. We've left them all to themselves. And that is a concern I have expressed to many actors within the security space in Ghana. I said, look, if we are not careful, the security situation in these countries might deteriorate to the extent that we would see it falling out and affecting us in other countries within the South region. Because of the closely knit nature of our societies, we have FS in Ghana and in Togo. We have Mushis in Ghana and in Burkina Faso. We have Fulanis in Ghana and in Nigeria. We are closely networked, you get me? And so whatever happens in one country has the potential of spilling over into another country. What is happening in Nigeria has on several occasions spilled over into neighboring countries, Chad, Niger. Okay, so we need to really pay attention to their security concerns because in the long term, it inures to our benefit. The Accra initiative, for example, to a large extent, depends on intelligence from these countries. So we are able to prevent the spillover from the Sahel into the littorals. Okay, so you know they feel they've been let down, and the only way out is to bring the Russians. And I can say emphatically that is not going to be the solution to their woes. No, not at all. They need the West. Hate it or love it. Even though I have my own differences with the West, with some of the things they do, but they need them. They have the technology. Okay? They have the money. Just recently, EU released some monies, excuse me. Last year, some Huskies were released to the Ghana government. All right? To be able to fight this war. They cannot do it alone. All right, but I think bringing in the Russians is going to be the salvation. No.
I was going to ask about, I was just going to make a sarcastic comment actually about, you know, swapping one dictator for another. If you look at it in the larger picture, you're saying either you go to the West or you go to Russia. There is an end game that is not clear to us. And then that dominance factor, the scramble for Africa, still continues. The new military structure that we hear is also intended for deployment in other African countries, aside Burkina Faso. We heard they're going to Libya, the Central African Republic, Mali, and Niger. So I'd like to ask, do you expect any resistance or will they succeed just like they have in Burkina Faso?
Well, Felicity, the thing is, they are already there on the ground. It's just Wagner changing uniform.
Yeah.
Okay? Because they've absorbed the Russian government from day one, after the death of Prigozhin, said that, look, if you want, you can just put down the Wagner uniform and come join the army. You are welcome. And we've had a lot of them do. It's just a few who are still in Belarus, okay? And so those Wagner forces who have been cited by the Human Rights Watch, by Amnesty International, for engaging in gross human rights violations in Libya and in Mali are the same people who have transformed themselves into this new outfit we are talking about today. It's the same gin, but just that it's in a recycled bottle, all right? And so you cannot depend on them 100% because they are already in Libya. They are there. They are in Sudan, by the way. And so even the Ukrainians have attacked targets inside Sudan because they feel
Aren't there concerns about the speed at which Russia re-strategized so quickly from Wagner in the matter of months, they have another unit, even though we know that this Wagner group, this new group is made up of people from, soldiers from the defunct Wagner private entity. What should be Africa's leadership response to these exploits in the continent?
Well, it becomes a very dicey situation, Felicity. The thing is, countries are sovereign. They are independent countries who can make their own decisions. And so it becomes very difficult for Ghana to, let's say, tell Burkina Faso, hey, don't let Wagner in.
No, I'm looking at the regional level, the AU or ECOWAS or other sub-regional bodies.
Felicity, last year, some individuals were arrested in Ghana because they were thought to be supporters of Wagner and they were promoting Wagner in Ghana. So I asked a simple question, on what basis? Regionally, have we designated Wagner? No. Countries in Europe, some have designated them as international organized criminals, some have designated them as terrorist organizations. The French Parliament was in the process of designating them an international foreign terrorist organization. The British have designated them, the European Parliament has designated them and all that. So you have a strong basis to go after them or to say no. But in West Africa, nothing. We have not designated them. So on what basis would we resist them? That is why it boils down to the individual countries. Maybe Burkina Faso might take them in, but Ghana wouldn't take them in. You get the drift. Yeah. So it becomes a very difficult situation until we have a united front with a united voice, with a united commitment to improving the security within the sub-region before we'll be able to make any progress. As we speak, we have left Burkina Faso, Mali, and the rest to themselves.
Asim, it's easier to go through. I've forgotten the parable now. The picture you're painting isn't one that gives, any sort of optimism that there can be a collective or decisive decision making by African leaders to, try and, curtail the expansion efforts of the West and Russia. Russia itself is working hard to grow not just its military presence, but also its economic influence on the region. I guess the question I should be asking now is, what would be some of the pros and cons of this push? While people know there is risk, they feel more secure having this kind of military presence in their environment. So what are the others?
Well, maybe the terrorists might think these countries are having help from, or are getting help from the Russians, who have a more potent military capability and capacity. And so that might it might be a big drawback to the expansion of these terrorist groups within the sub-region. Secondly, I think it might add some level of motivation to the various militaries who are fighting the terrorists. I mean, in countries such as Mali, the military is very demotivated. I mean, Burkina Faso, almost the same thing. Okay. Because they just need the means to a living, As a result, I think that it's really become a very difficult situation. On the other hand, like I indicated earlier, they've been cited for various offenses, including unlawful killing, extrajudicial killings, and all that. I remember a case involving the mass grave at a former French military base in Mali. So they were making it look like it existed when the French were there. Meanwhile, a drone captured them doing it after the French had left. So we really have a lot of security concerns within the sub-region, and until we are able to come together as one under one umbrella, it becomes very complex to deal with these security.
I mean, let's see if there is anything we can get off this.
Sorry about that. I'm getting a lot of calls. Getting a lot of calls come through my phone. That is why.
Yeah, but, I noticed we missed you a bit.
We need to. Sorry.
Go ahead. I said we missed you a bit. Go ahead.
Yes. So in a nutshell, we need to come together under one umbrella. We've had many interventions. The Accra Initiative, Operation Bakanta, Cuba, the Joint Task Force, MINUSMA, etc. I think it's too many. I mean, it almost looks like people are making money from this. They are enjoying it. Why don't we come together under one umbrella, okay, with a common voice, like I indicated, with a common sense of purpose? If not, it becomes...
is there maybe anything? Can you hear me?
I can hear you.
All right. Is there anything to learn from how quickly the Kremlin recalibrated its strategy in Africa after the demise of the Wagner Group?
Can you come again? I missed you. Sorry.
Okay, I'm asking if there's anything we can learn from how quickly the Russian president re-strategized after the disintegration of the Wagner Group.
Absolutely. I mean, for me, I saw it coming. I saw it coming. I knew something like that would happen.
I'm actually asking you, Adib, I'm actually asking you if there is anything Africa can learn from how quickly they pulled this up together. I mean, in just a matter of months, they're spreading all over Africa again with a different name, but similarly the same soldiers.
That's exactly what I was coming to.
Okay.
A lot of us asked what would become of Wagner after the demise of Prigozhin and his deputy. Now, the Russian government has easily been able... Here we are. They've rebranded Wagner into a new military alliance. So I think the only lessons we can learn from this is the fact that Russia is still very much determined to have some level of influence and presence in Africa, and to stop at nothing doing so. And so we need to watch out. I mean, because in foreign policy, there are no permanent friends. It's all about interest. What is it they want from us? We should ask ourselves questions rather than just, accepting everybody without, exercising any due diligence.
All right. When it comes to the complexity of Russia's expanding influence in Africa, one country strikes a perfect example. I'm actually reading this from something I saw online, and that's the Central African Republic. In 2018, it decided to build stronger ties with Russia, signing a defense agreement. The next step is supposed to be the opening of an official Russian military base somewhere in Berengo, equipped to meet the needs of over 10,000 soldiers. They said that place, Berengo, already has an airport and other installments necessary for running a military base. Now, a civil rights activist, Paul Beninga, described the plan as a paradox. We're under the impression, this is a direct quote from him, we're under the impression that we have just switched leaders. We left France only to bow down to Russia. Your thoughts? Okay, I'm told we've lost Adib, but his submissions has been great so far. Let's see if we can reconnect right after this break.
My wife was eating that.
Thank you for staying with us. We still have Adib Sani, Foreign Policy and Security Analyst. He's been with us all the way from Accra, Ghana. So just before that break, I was trying to ask a question about how the Central African Republic have decided to build a military base in the southern town of Berengo, equipped with everything that a military requires to function. And then civil rights activist Paul Crescent Beninga described the plan as a paradox, and a direct quote from him is, "We are under the impression that we have just switched leaders. We left France only to bow down to Russia." I wondered your thoughts on this.
Well, I mean, the Central African Republic, for example, since the ouster of Bouazizi, has been restive to a very large extent over a very long time. The country descended into communal violence in the streets of Bangui and other parts of the country. At a point, there were a lot of warlords, different armies. It was even difficult to track, them. Some were operating in the flank, some were operating in the very heart of Bangui and other big cities in the country. Then there was an election. A president was elected, but divisions in the country that made it very difficult for a lot of people to leave. And as a result, a lot left. And so the government just as other governments fell, like Niger, Mali, Burkina Faso, felt the world had turned its back against them. Western countries have turned their backs against them. And so they had to look to the East. I am not in any way surprised this is happening in the country. And what Russia is doing strategically is taking advantage of disgruntled countries. Okay, so obviously, your enemy's enemy becomes your friend. All right, so when things get sour between individual countries and their Western backers, they easily slide in and fill the vacuum. And that's exactly what we are seeing on this occasion. And there are many more countries to follow, by the way. Many, many more countries. That is why the West would also have to up their game. There's the need for a strategic partnership between these developing countries and the West. It should be based on mutual benefits that would drive their economies in the right direction. But if we don't see that happening, the Russians will take advantage, just as we are seeing in all of these countries.
All right, Adib, I guess I should be asking for your final thoughts. Our second guest is unable to make it, so we had to extend this conversation a little further. So I noticed your calls were coming in a lot. Please, just your final thoughts on the subject of having such elite military groups in Africa and the dangers that it portends.
You see, Felicity, the thing is, there's no military solution to any problem in any part of the world, okay? The Americans were in Afghanistan for a long time. What was the end game? We are seeing the Israelis bomb Gaza into smithereens. What's the end game? How is this going to ensure Israeli security? There's no military solution. So instead of these guns and bullets, we rather need jobs, food, water, healthcare. That is what we need. So if really you want to cooperate with us, bring these. That is what we need. Help us to be able to improve on the lives of the people. Because when you look at a lot of the security situations, it's human security centered. People become terrorists because of human insecurities, when their rights are violated, bad governance, corruption, etc. And so if we are able to improve on the lives of the people, make it more quality, that would help to a large extent even prevent people from joining terrorist groups in the first place. It doesn't always have to be the guns.
True, that
we
is
need,
true.
We need those two approaches. We need there's a name that has skipped my mind, but we need those kinetic and the non-kinetic approaches, but it doesn't always have to be guns.
I guess that's a good place to leave the conversation. Adib, thank you very much for your insights.
Thank you, Felicity.
All right, that's how we will wrap up one slot today. Our second guest was supposed to speak on empowering women in agriculture, and that's ahead of a meeting on February 16. That's on Friday, the 7th high-level breakfast meeting of empowering women in agriculture. It was supposed to hold on the margins of the 37th African Union Summit. We wanted to explore what the current situation is with growing women in the agricultural sector and seeing what more can be done. Unfortunately, our guest could not make it. Hopefully, we'll have the conversation another time. Thank you, as always, for your kind attention. The program returns next week. I'm Felicity Ezewike.